Welcome to Central Valley Writers Workshop. Our Great Valley is home to many writers and authors, all looking for tips, tools, and techniques to improve their writing skills. Our hope is that you'll get all of this and more as we interview authors, writers, and experts on our show. I'm your host, Claudia Newcorn, author of the award-winning Chrysalis Chronicles of Fairy series, freelance editor and writer, and Modesto Bee community columnist. As our guest today, we're honored to have Kimberly Van Meter. Kimberly is in no other way an amazing Harlequin romance writer. She has written 18 books and there are more on the way. Kimberly, thank you so very much for being with us here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You know, when one looks at all the books you've written, it's kind of overwhelming almost. Most of us hope to write one or two. Could you tell us a bit about how you got into writing and what inspired you to do that?
Well, I was always a writer. I think writers are born, and before I was a writer, I was a voracious reader. So I read everything that I could get my hands on, and my grandmother gave me a copy of Gone with the Wind when I was 11. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the biggest book I've ever seen in my life. I'm never going to be able to finish it. And so I put it on a shelf, and then I didn't actually pick it up again until I was 13. But once I started reading that book, it changed my life. I just devoured it, and I ended up, when I graduated from high school, I had read that book 8 times.
Wow.
And each time I read the book, I came away with something new, something that I had missed when I read it the previous time. And it sparked a need to do the same thing, to write, to create. And I started taking little bits and pieces of stories that I had tinkered with, and I just started expanding on them. And when I was 15 or 16, I can't quite remember the date, I wrote my first novel. It was awful. Okay, we are not talking about award-winning prose here. This is typical of a 15-year-old girl. I mean,
gosh.
Oh gosh. It was just embarrassing. But what I took from that experience is, I had to finish it from start to finish. That is the hardest thing for anyone who endeavors to write a novel, is to just finish it. That in itself is a huge endeavor.
I agree.
Because when you get to the middle of the book, pretty much you're going, I hate this book. I hate these people. Who said this was a good idea? This is lame. I want to start something new. And you have to push past that and get past what they call the sagging middle and trust yourself. Trust that you started this journey, there is an end in sight, and it's going to be fabulous. Just get through. So that was the first lesson that I learned. But there was also something else that I learned with that first book, perseverance. And that can also be tied to finishing, but I didn't have an easy go of it. We grew up very poor, and my parents did the absolute best that they could, and I attribute many of the values and ethics that I have in my personal life to the way I was raised. But we didn't have a lot of money for extras. So what I typed on was a very, very old manual portable typewriter that was my mom's. But we couldn't afford ink. We couldn't afford the ribbon. So the old ribbon that was in it was dusty, and so I would lick it.
Seriously?
I would lick
oh, that's
it.
fabulous.
I can still taste that ribbon. It's gross. Don't do it. I don't recommend it. Not a good thing. But
you were that
committed.
I
was that committed, and I would give up time with my friends. I would sit there late at night after I'd done my homework, after I'd finished my homework, and I would just type and type and type and type. And when I finally finished, it felt like a victory. It felt like I was going to be famous, because surely I was the only teenager who had ever written a novel under these conditions. I mean, this was,
the story itself of the writing right there.
Exactly. So I bundled it up, and I gave it to my dad to read, because I was so I was hot off the press. I couldn't wait for him to read it. And he starts thumbing through it, and he's reading, and suddenly a chuckle starts to happen, and he starts giggling, and then he's laughing outright, and then he's almost crying. Tears are rolling down his face, and I got so angry. I was like, it's not a comedy! It was actually a murder mystery.
Oh,
so
dear.
I became so angry, I grabbed it out of his hands and I threw it in the trash. And
Did he rescue it?
he did. He pulled it out of the trash, unbeknownst to me,
Mm-hmm.
and he swears he still has it in safekeeping so that when I become famous, he's going to put it on eBay.
I don't know. That sounds like he's holding your manuscript hostage.
It does.
And he may be blackmailing on you.
Yeah.
Why Harlequin Romance? I mean, you obviously, as you said, you're a voracious reader. I'm sure you still read like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide to pursue the romance genre?
It's what I love to read.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually realize what I was reading was for pleasure was romance, because Gone with the Wind is not a romance. It's an epic love story, however, it is not a romance. A lot of people get that confused. A romance is classified by having what is essential, happily ever after. And as we
Okay.
all know, Scarlett does not get her happily ever
No.
after.
Neither does Rhett.
No. So it is not a romance.
Okay.
However, when I read for pleasure, I love that feeling that everything is going to work out, that even if they can go through hell and they can just tear at each other and go through horrible circumstances, but at the very end, it's going to come together. And I think that hope, that hope buoys me. And I think because I'm also a reporter at my day job.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I deal.
Uh-huh.
I write news during the day, and that's
Whoa.
just yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with the cops. I'm the cop and fire beat, and so sometimes the stories are depressing.
I was going to say, Kimberly, you couldn't be as more opposite ends of the spectrum if you tried on
I
your
know.
writing.
That's just how I roll. And I like that even though in real life not everything works out,
Mm-hmm.
in a romance it will. And I need that happy ending. I love that sense of hope, and it enables me to disconnect from what I do during the day and go into a world where it's going to be all right.
Do you write at night then? I mean, it sounds like you have a special writing time. I met your very charming daughter when we were at the book signing. She's an absolute pepper pot and had all sorts of stories she was telling me. I know where she's getting it from. But here you are, you're working full time, you're on a pretty tough beat. Where do you find the time and the inspiration to write what is really a diametrically opposed topic?
Well, I get that question a lot, and the issue of time. And one of my pet peeves is when I hear people say, oh, I would love to write a book, but I don't have time. That's not true. You and I and everyone else has been graced with the same 24 hours. It's how we choose to use it that's different. I give up, I sacrifice time with my family. I sacrifice watching television. I sacrifice my lunch hour early in the morning. Sometimes I don't go to bed till midnight. So my days are very long. Most of the times I'm very tired. But it's worth it. It's a sacrifice that I believe is worth it. It fulfills me in a way that watching television isn't going to. And I believe everyone needs a downtime. Everyone needs time to just relax and veg out or whatever they do to fill the well. But you have to draw the line somewhere. You have to say, okay, I'm going to watch an hour of my favorite shows, or I'm going to take a half a day and just putter around the house or do what I need to do, with the knowledge that you will return to the work and you have a schedule that you're keeping with yourself. Self-discipline is so, so important. That is the number one key, I think, for people who are able to keep up as punishing a schedule as I do have. Because I also do other things. I actually also design ebook covers for people who self-publish and for authors who are publishing their backlist, which is very popular right now.
Do you sleep? I mean, you've got, like I say, you have a marvelous little daughter. Where do you find time to sleep in the middle of all of this?
I actually require a lot of sleep. That's what's amazing. I'm just, I guess, more efficient with my time.
And we'll be right back with Kimberly Van Meter.
Quality, experience, integrity. Countryman's Village Jewelers, in business over 40 years, exemplifies these characteristics. with timeless classics to custom designs. Countryman's Village Jewelers features gifts for this holiday season at under $100. Countryman's Village Jewelers in McHenry Village, the jeweler you can trust.
And we're back with author Kimberly Van Meter. Which leads to, you were talking before we started the interview, there's a myth out there that Harlequin romances are formulas. Pop that myth for us and tell us the truth about writing these type of stories.
Writing these types of stories are difficult, they're complicated, they're just like real life, and there is no formula.
It's a myth.
It is a myth, and if there were a way for us to put in a generator, names and locations, then everyone would be doing it. But it is not that easy. I agonize sometimes over the stories because I want them to be real. I want my characters to be gritty and dirty and just like real life. I want them to be complicated. So that's one of the things in my stories that my readers have always commented, is that there's such a sense of realism, and sometimes realism is hard to take. For example, one of the stories I wrote in my Native Country series, because I also write for Harlequin Romantic Suspense, I write for 2 lines.
Okay.
And this was set in Washington State on an actual Indian reservation in Washington. And I had to do a lot of research. There was an assault in the story. It was integral to the story. That was not easy to write. And I wanted to be true to the victim's journey, to not so much focus on the fact that she was victimized, but focus on the fact that she could find her way back to who she was before something was taken from her. And that was such a powerful, powerful journey for myself as I did the research, that I was crying as I was writing scenes because it touched a place inside of me that I had forgotten, or maybe not so much forgotten, I had shut out. And I just was sobbing.
Wow.
And sobbing, and that story to me is so special. It's called Sworn to Protect, and there was no formula.
Well,
there was no formula to that one.
Listening to you, I'm hearing a true author speaking, and yet here you are, you're writing these marvelous romances. Did you approach Harlequin, or you told me that you received the call? Can you tell us a little bit about what all of that was?
My favorite story.
You're welcome.
The call. Okay. Well, the call came through many years of blood, sweat, and tears. Many rejected novels. The novel that sold, my first book, was called The Truth About Family, and it was the 4th completed novel that I had submitted to Harlequin.
Really?
And I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my daughter. I was on bed rest. I had a very delicate pregnancy. I almost lost her numerous times. I almost died. I mean, I had a horrible, I had placenta previa. I had high blood pressure. I mean, I started to go into labor a little early, and so there was just all these things. All I could do was lie there like a slug and gestate. That's all I could do.
That's a visual, okay.
That's all I was and I had these visions too of when I first got pregnant, how I was going to be active and how I was going to be walking every day, and that didn't happen. So I just gestated. But while I did that, I wrote. I sat there and I'm like, well, if all I can do is lie here, then at least I can be productive in some way. And so I wrote that book, sent it off, and we were struggling financially. So at the time, you couldn't email your manuscript. Now we can email, but at the time you had to mail the manuscript, and it cost $70 to mail a full manuscript to Canada, which is where I had to send it.
Wow. So
I had a difficult time, getting the manuscripts to Canada, and I had to save and save and save. And when I kept getting rejections, it just felt like a slice into my soul, but I wouldn't give up. I refused to give up, and that tenacity was really what carried me through. But what happened was, when I finally got the call, my daughter was 6 months old, it was a Wednesday, and I was at work, and it was Wednesdays are our staff meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I had her on my hip because I always brought her to the staff meetings. We had a pretty kid-friendly office. And my cell phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number. And I was like, well, I'll just let it go to voicemail because I got to go to this meeting. But I have this thing about a ringing phone, and so I couldn't just let it go to voicemail. And so I picked it up, and I said, hello, is Kim there? And I said, this is she. And she said, this is Johanna from Harlequin. And I was like, Johanna Risen from Harlequin. I went, ah! And I just held my breath because I was like, hello. Because good news comes by phone, bad news comes by letter. And I was just like, yeah, yes.
May I help you?
And she said, well, we would love to buy your book. And
Wow.
I screamed. I nearly dropped my baby. Luckily, my newspaper editor, they were all clustered around me because they knew that I was on this journey. And they were like pulling for me. And she swooped in and grabbed the baby before I dropped her because I was shrieking at this point. She was like,
Finally.
And it was just an amazing moment. And crying. And I don't really remember a lot after that. And there was a lot of talk about the contract and the advance and all that business stuff. And she was so wonderful. She says, I'm going to call you back
After the shock settles in.
and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, thank you. I felt like Sally Field, I was like, and it was just the most amazing moment. And I was worthless at work that day.
And everyone forgave you.
Everyone forgave me. I think they rode that wave right along with me.
Wow, what
awesome.
an extraordinary experience. Yet now you've written so many books. Again, like I say, I fall off my feet when I see 18. Walk us through the process. Here you are, because writers are learning from you. How do you go about conceiving the book, the characters, plotting it out? What's involved in the process, and how long does it take you from beginning to end?
Okay. Well, first I want to add, I want to preface what I will say with, don't try this at home.
Okay.
My process is messy.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't recommend anyone to try it this way unless this is the way that works for them. The way that I come across a new story idea is very intuitive. I'm a very intuitive writer, very organic. I'm a pantser almost to an extreme. I don't really know much about the story, but I do know the characters. I know the people.
Mm-hmm.
They come to me. The names pop in my head, and I see them, and they materialize, and then I start asking them questions, and then I interview them in my head, much as if I were interviewing someone for a newspaper article. And I find out what makes them tick, and then I dig into their past, and I find out what's wrong with you. What are your hang-ups? Do you have abandonment issues? Why do you have abandonment issues? Why, and I do a little psychology into who they are, and then I take really rough notes, and then I build a story, a really loose story around what I know about them and what would really upset them. What would be almost just the worst thing for that character to go through for their own personal growth. And then I pitch it to my editor, and because she loves me and she thinks I'm amazing. No.
But she's got to see, is it sellable? She has to look at it that way.
She has to see it. And she has to see, is it sellable? Is it sustainable? Because one of the biggest mistakes that newer writers make, and even established authors, we sometimes fall into this, is the conflict strong enough to sustain a whole novel? To sustain 400 pages. Can you take this for 400 pages?
Excellent way of putting it. Okay, yeah.
A lot of people think, well, but my plot is so intricate. That's external. What's the internal? What's the character struggling with? You can't just, if you have nothing but plot, then it becomes episodic. It's just, and then we went here, and then we had to go here, and then we had to go there, and then we had coffee. You gotta propel your characters internally, because that's gonna affect why they go get coffee. It's gonna affect, maybe they hate coffee, and maybe they love tea, and they are dragged to this coffee shop because of whatever. That's internal and external at work.
Okay.
So you have to, that's why you really have to know who those characters are and what makes them tick, because you don't want to fall into the episodic trap. So that's how I approach a story.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming I get the green light, if my editor says, I love this story, I love this series, whatever, what have you, then I start into the process. And this is where it gets messy. No, I for a while never told people this. So this is a secret.
Okay.
I'm imparting a secret, a dirty secret.
Quickly, let me get the tape recorder out.
I am a first draft writer.
Really?
Yes.
That's very rare. You know that.
I've heard this. I don't know how to explain it. I just know when a story is going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel it. It's that intuitive thing that I talked about earlier. When the characters stop talking in my head, when I stop seeing the scenes unfold, I know I've gone in the wrong direction.
Okay.
And so I backtrack. And I've gotten to the point now where I don't need to backtrack that much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just know. I can feel it. It sounds so, woo.
Well, no, but you've got the experience. It's you're almost in a way like a pianist. You know if you've hit the wrong note, and
Yeah.
you come back immediately. You've got the experience to do that.
And so when I turn my drafts into my editor,
Mm-hmm.
they're first drafts.
Really, you are again totally atypical. Now, as you're writing a first draft, though, do you go back a little bit and clean up as you're going along, or do you just give them the draft in the raw?
No, I do clean a little,
Mm-hmm.
but not structural. I'm looking for dropped words,
Okay.
things that, I used the wrong tense for that. I use this, I use that. I don't structurally change anything.
So it's really more grammar, punctuation work. Okay.
Right. Just to, clean it for my editor. And then what my editor does, and I have been blessed to have the same editor who purchased me.
Uh-huh.
And purchased me. That sounds
It's okay.
sounds like I became okay.
Is there something we should know?
She gets my writing,
Mm-hmm.
and she and I work together so well that she takes what I give her and turns it into just beautiful.
The finished product.
The finished product. She just refines it so well, and she doesn't mess with my voice
Mm-hmm.
or my technique or anything like that. She just smooths out the rough edges, and we make an amazing team. And because of that, I think that's why I was nominated last year for a Rita, which is the biggest award you can get in romance. It is the Oscar of romance. I mean,
What
it's
an
a red
honor.
carpet event. I
Mhm.
mean, we went to New York. It was in New York last year, and when I was nominated, I just sobbed. It was a milestone.
Oh, yes. Kimberly, congratulations. As you say, the
Thank you.
nomination right then and there.
I didn't win, but
In due
just
time.
to be nominated was an incredible honor, because the sheer number of entries is.
Well, but you wouldn't have been nominated if your work wasn't superlative. I mean, you earned that.
Thank
As much as you're saying that, you sounds like you got an incredible symbiosis here with your editor. You have the germ of an idea, you fly it by her, you write your first draft, and submit it to her for polishing and fine-tuning and grooming from the beginning to the end. Because you've written so many books, how long does the process take?
Well, it takes several months for
Mm-hmm.
the entire process, because you have your manuscript goes through 4 passes. You have your
Okay.
initial, you write it, send it off. You get revisions from the editor, and mine are never structural changes. Sometimes my editor will ask for clarification on a plot point, or she'll be concerned about some of the dialogue. So it's never structural. It's never, oh gosh, we need to take this chapter out and move it under the back and move it here.
Okay.
Never.
Wow.
The last time I had that big of a change was my first book. So I learned very quickly, and I learned to listen to my voice. Now, after the revisions are turned in, then she'll do her copy edits. So then it'll come back to me, and we'll do line edits, which is another fine tuning. And then it'll come back to me again for the final look over, and I have to go over it with like a fine-tooth comb, making sure that all the changes that we had made previously have now been input into the new manuscript. And then once that's clear, in fact, they're called AAs. I'm doing those right now for the book second in this series, and that's due next week. So even though I'm writing a book number 19 right now, I'm still working on book number 18. So there's the back end stuff that still has to be done, and then you have to do your art fact sheet, which we call the AFS. And what that is, that's for the art department, for them to create the covers. They take information that I have given them about my book to create the cover.
Okay.
So that's very important, and it's tedious, and we all hate it. But it's like homework. We're all like, oh, I did my AFS.
The last phase, yes.
It's sometimes like for the AFS that I did for the book I'm writing now, I'm still writing the book. I don't know.
You're not
there
yet.
Know. So I kind of have to guess what's going to be happening, because we're supposed to put in 3 key scenes, and they use that information to choose the cover.
Okay. Now, question for you. As we're wrapping up, I would like you to take a moment. I mean, you've got extensive experience. You've watched your writing evolve and change. You're learning the publishing arena like most people hope to learn. If you were sitting before a group of aspiring writers, young authors, what would be some of the key points that you would like to share with them that you've learned through your own experience?
Don't give up. Don't give up. It's too easy to give up. And if everyone were meant to do this, everyone would. I can't draw. Nobody wants me as their Pictionary partner. No one, not even my own husband. So that's okay, because not everyone can write a book. And that's okay too. But if you are truly, truly passionate and willing to sacrifice and willing to do what needs to do, and take hard criticisms and listen to others who have gone before you and take the lessons that they are trying to teach you, you will make it. It might not be within the time frame that you want. It took me 10 years from the point that I said, I want to do this. This is what I want. I want nothing more than this. And 10 years was a long time.
But you've had the passion and the dedication, and I think that's what's carried you to this amazing high. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing your new books. I'm looking forward to having you back on my show to talk more about all of that. I would like to invite you to participate in a tradition of the show, which is pulling the pineapple. We'd be honored if you would add your book to our shelf.
Okay.
Tug on that pineapple for us. Thank you very much. One of these days we'll get all 18 of them on there. And Kimberly, I wanted to thank you so much for being with us today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure you've inspired a lot of our writers to realize if you've got the determination, even if the first book you ever write is something your father is hoarding for eBay, you have the opportunity to succeed. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today. We've had the pleasure of hearing from Kimberly Van Meter, who is an incredibly experienced Harlequin romance writer. She's got more books coming out. If you'd like to learn about her and her books, please visit our website at KAZV-TV. And until then, thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to having you again on the next Central Valley Writers Workshop. Have a great day.